Hey, I think we will start. Um, I got a message from one of the colleague here saying don't receive the presentation deck. I'll share it again today for people who have not got it. I'll be sending yesterday's and today's both the task document um, and the slides themselves. Just see that there's a message as well. Lata has invited here to take notes and record. The problem is that by policy, we don't allow recording of the session, just to let you know. Second. Right. Fine. Thank you very much for joining, guys. Welcome back to day 2 of our expert guided implementation prerequisites of activating Joule. Today, we are going to deep dive into the prerequisites of activating Joule. And if day 1 was about understanding what Joule is and what it can do for your organization, day 2 is about understanding the foundational concepts that need to be in place before you can even begin to activate Joule in your landscape. I want to set the expectations upfront. Activating Joule is not simple. It's not a simple flip the switch exercise. It requires a well-configured identity and access management landscape, properly set up SAP build work zone, and consistent user identifiers across your systems. Today, we are going to walk through each of these building blocks in detail. Our agenda for today's covers 3 major areas. We'll look SAP Cloud Entity Services. What is this? What is the service exactly? Their key components and their features and why they are absolutely mandatory for Joule. And second is we'll explore SAP Build Work Zone and its foundational concepts within the context of Joule. And finally, we can wrap up with key learnings. And we are going to go through all the uh, tasks that we had for yesterday and today as well. So I want to know if you people got a chance to do any of those tasks that were shared yesterday. I believe some of them were not able to receive the slides themselves, but people who were able to access, I want to know if they were able to get through any of those tasks. If not, anyway, we are going to go through all of these tasks today as well. Right. So here's what we are going to cover today. We'll walk through the agenda so you know what to expect over the next 2 hours. We'll start with the Cloud Entity Services, an introduction, look at the key components, features. This is the backbone of everything Joule related from an identity perspective. We will spend a good amount of time here because if your Cloud Entity Services are not properly configured, Joule simply will not work. Then we'll move into importance of Cloud Entity Services, specifically for the enablement of Joule itself. This is where we connect the dots between CIS, what CIS does generally, and what it does specifically for Joule, right? After that, we'll shift gears to SAP Build Work Zone. Its foundational concepts as well. Build Work Zone is also the other critical component, right? And we will look at it specifically within the context of Joule as well. And finally, as I said, we'll wrap up with key learnings, next steps, and discussion of additional resources as well. Uh, Please feel free to raise your hand, like better drop questions in the chat anytime. If a question is going to be addressed in later slide, I'll let you know. Okay, so the main reason we are here is to discuss the recommended approach, of course. Joule can keep a track of context across different line of business solution. It can seamlessly pick up your conversation held with Joule in one LOB solution, and you can continue with the same conversation in another LOB solution if you're using the same Joule instance, right? That's the idea of Joule for that's the idea for Joule altogether, right? So we want one Joule instance to be able to talk to all of these line of business solutions in scope. So that's only possible if all of these LOB solutions are connected to the same cloud entity services. that is connected to the Joule sub account. So we understood what's BDP, what sub accounts looks like, what needs to be propagated to the sub account in order to get the Joule entitlement, and how you can activate Joule using the Joule booster. Yesterday we spoke about that. But before you can flick that button, right, that um, Joule booster itself, you need to have this setup consistent. So you need to be able to plan your users to be available in Cloud Entity Services. And we'll discuss what's Cloud Entity Services, how you can do that. And of course, your systems are dynamic. There's a lot of users coming in, going out, how you manage that identity lifecycle. That's what we are going to discuss today. So we'll enter the Cloud Entity Services deep dive. We'll cover the introduction, key components, look at the identity directory, the identity provisioning, identity authentication in detail. And after that, we'll bring all these together by looking at Cloud Entity Services within the context of Joule. Right. So before we dive into the specifics of Cloud Entity Services, right, let me set the stage by talking about identity access management domains at a high level. So IAM generally falls into two broad domains. The first is setting up the stage. This is about getting the foundational IAM infrastructure in place. It includes things like deploying your identity provider, configuring provisioning, setting up trust relationships, establishing your user store. This is the phase where you are building the plumbing. And the second is the daily operation. This is about the ongoing management of identities and access requests, certifications, segregation of duties, checks, and the day-to-day lifecycle of users in your landscape. For Joule activation, we are primarily focused on, just give me a second, might have pushed it ahead. Let me go back here. Yep, for Joule activation, we are primarily focused on the first domain, the setting up stage, because you need to have your IAM foundation solidly in place before Joule can work. But the second domain matters too, because once Joule is active and you need to maintain user records, role assignments, and provisioning consistency on an ongoing basis. With that framing in mind, let's dive into the first major topic that's in CIS. Right, so Cloud Entity Services, or CIS. These are the default SAP solution to authenticate and provisioning users in SAP Cloud Solutions. So let me emphasize that with default, because this is SAP's standard out-of-the-box identity solution for cloud landscapes. So if you happen to get an IBP tenant from SAP, it comes in default locked in to your default test tenant. The IBP test tenant will be latched on to your default CIS test tenant, and your production IBP tenant will be latched on to your default production test tenant. So the production CIS tenant. So what I'm trying to say is that it's default the SAP standard out-of-box identity solution for all the cloud landscapes. So SAP CIS offers the following components that work together to facilitate the IAM lifecycle within a SAP landscape. We were talking about the two phases, right? So anyway, first is the identity authentication. This handles how the users prove who they are when they log in. And the second is the identity provisioning, which handles the distribution of user records and their role assignments to connected systems. And then there comes authorization management, which handles the authorization aspects. There's identity directory, which is the central user store where the user records and groups are persisted. Now, here's an important point that often comes up as a question. There is no need to separately license the usage of SAP CIS when used with SAP Cloud Solutions. By default, yesterday I was saying that two CIS tenants are offered free of charge, typically one for productive and one for non-productive use. So licensing should not be a barrier for any of you. If anyone is wondering why we need CIS specifically for Joule, I'll be covering that in detail in a few slides. But the short answer is that Joule is a BTP application that connects across the SAP solution. And you definitely need a consistent way to authenticate these users and track them across all these systems, right? So, so Cloud Entity Services is that mechanism. All right, so this diagram gives you a simplified view of what SAP Cloud Entity Services encompasses. There are three major functional areas. The first is the identity lifecycle management. This covers the creation, modification, deletion of the users and their identities throughout their lifecycle. From the moment a user joins your organization to when they leave, CIS is going to manage that journey. And the second is the authentication and single sign-on. This is about verifying who the user is and enabling them to access multiple applications without logging in repeatedly, right? You don't want to repeatedly log in. So SSO is absolutely critical for Joule experience, and we will discuss shortly about that. And the third is delegated authentication. This is the ability to delegate the actual authentication to a third-party identity provider, like Microsoft Entra ID or Active Directory. This is important because most enterprise customers already have an established corporate IDP and they want to reuse it, right? Rather than maintain a separate set of credentials. So these are the three areas that together form the core of what CIS does. Now let's look at each of these components in more detail, starting with identity directory itself. Right. So we'll start with identity directory because conceptually, this is where everything begins. It's where your users live. What is identity directory? The identity directory is the central component for persisting users and the groups inside SAP Cloud Identity Services. Think of it as your centralized user store within the SAP Cloud landscape. How do you access this identity directory? There are three ways. So first is through your identity provisioning service. So SAP Cloud Identity Services identity provisioning can read from and write to the directory. Okay, so there's two-way communication possible using identity provisioning. And the second is through Scheme 2.0 API. So SCIM, basically SAP Cloud Identity Services, exposes a Scheme 2.0 API that allows you programmatically access the identities inside the directory. This is useful specifically for your custom integration or if you need to automate user management tasks. So, and the third one is also through your SAP Cloud Identity Services admin UI, of course. This gives you a graphical interface to manage users and groups directly. These three access method gives you like flexibility depending on your use case, whether you need automated provisioning, you want a programmatic access, or you want manual administration. So if I go deeper into what Identity Directory can do, it functions as a centralized user store, as I said, and can be utilized as a source of truth for users within a SAP landscape. This is a critical concept, right? Having a single source of truth for user entities is what enables consistency across your landscape. SCIM 2.0 API allows you to programmatically access the identity inside the directory, right? SCIM stands for System for Cross-Domain Identity Management. It is an industry standard. So if you are familiar with SCIM from the other identity management contexts, the same contexts are going to apply here. So the identity directory supports both the storage and maintenance of user records and the storage of maintenance groups as well. So groups are important because they represent role assignment. And role assignments are what's going to determine what a user can do in each of the connected system. The identity directory can both be used as a source of a user and group data, meaning other systems can read from it, and as a target as well, to which users and groups from other different systems are written from. For Joule specifically, the identity directory plays a critical role because it acts as the source for generating the SAP global user ID. So this is a unique identifier that follows a user across the entire SAP landscape. I'll cover global user ID in more detail in shortly, and when we discuss why CIS is required for Joule itself. But just know that the identity directory is where this identifier originates. So if you're wondering how user records get into the identity directory in the first place, that's where identity provisioning comes in, which is going to be our next topic. I'll just quickly check what's the question in the chat. We have business users, applications users, platform users accessing BTP platform. May I know whether we need to create all of these person users should be created in CIS if they want to access Joule? Yes, all of these users needs to be present in CIS. You need to consolidate all of these users inside your CIS and have a logic with which you can um, maintain a single user record for all of these users. If the same user is accessing from email in one system or a login name from another system, you need to consolidate this user record into one so that a single global user ID can be assigned by the identity directory in the CIS. All right, so how do you bring in all these users to Cloud Entity Services? That's exactly why we are talking about identity provisioning service. So the identity provisioning component, or the IPS, is what I would like to call the middleware of identity management. Its job is to read, write, update, and delete users and groups within a SAP landscape. So here's how it works conceptually. The IPS middleware reads the user and group data from one system, which we call the source system. Okay. And then you can have some logic with which it can transform the data into intermediary format that is going to be scheme compliant. So it then writes the data to other systems called the target systems after transforming the intermediate data again and into the format that is compatible with each of the target systems data model, right? So IPS uses connectors to facilitate this kind of transport of user and group records between systems in a SAP landscape. And IPS transformations are used to perform the necessary transformations to ensure the compliance of the data to different target system data models. So think of IPS as the postal service for identity data. It picks up user information from one place, it repackages it appropriately, and delivers it to where it needs to go. Without IPS, you would have to manually maintain user records in every single system, which is neither scalable nor practical. And for Joule, IPS is critical because it is used to provision user records and their role assignments, including that important global user ID to all the connected systems. This ensures that when a user accesses Joule, the system knows who they are, regardless of which line of business solution they are interacting with. All right, so we'll just talk about the three types of systems in IPS: the source, target, and proxy. And because understanding this is fundamental to configuring provisioning correctly. A source system is the connector used for reading entities, the users, groups, and roles, right? Source systems can be on-premise or cloud-based, SAP or non-SAP, and usually represent corporate user store where identities are currently maintained. For example, your corporate Active Directory or maybe your SAP SuccessFactors. These could be source systems. And target systems is a connector that is used to write or provision entities. Users and group data read from the source system and are written to the target system. For example, um, in SAP Build Work Zone, it would be a target system um, where user records and role assignments need to be provisioned for Joule to work. This is one of the very important key prerequisite. So proxy system again is a special connector used for hybrid scenarios. It exposes any identity provisioning supported backend system as a SCIM 2.0 service provider, which can then be consumed by any SCIM 2.0 compatible client application. This can be useful when you need to bridge between systems that don't natively speak the same identity protocol, right? So when we get to Joule activation steps later, you'll see that configuring the right source and the right target systems in IPS is one of the key tasks. For instance, you'll need to set up SuccessFactors as the source system and build WorkZone as the target system to ensure users and their roles are properly provisioned. And this could be any of the other line of business solution as well. So you could be integrating S4 with Joule, and you still need to do this. You need to provision your roles and groups from your S4 to build work zone. So you are going to use IPS, and you are going to configure these source and target systems. A bit deeper into IPS transformation engineer, because this is where a lot of precision work and sometimes a lot of troubleshooting happens, right? The IPS transformation engine uses transformation defined in JSON path syntax. Transformation can be defined and applied for each attributes of the user records and the group records. There are three capabilities, mainly assignment. So you can define rules for assignments based on your input data. Take, for example, the value of your identity's organizational unit to decide on the required roles. So if a user belongs to finance department, you can automatically assign them finance related roles and in the target system. And then mapping, you can map between identity models, for example, mapping between attributes in the different models, such as surname in one system could be family name in another system, right? You can also adjust the data format, for example, time for number formats. And this is essential because different SAP systems may use different attribute names for the same piece of information. And then there's filtering. You can decide in detail which objects shall be read or written. This is useful, especially when you want to provision a subset of users to particular target systems. I've seen a couple of customers using filters just to filter out few users to test out Joule with. For instance, you might want to only provision the users, right? Even you want to do the give Joule access rather than your entire user base. You want to give only specific set of users this access. These capabilities become very important during Joule activation because you need to ensure the right attributes, especially the global user ID, are mapped correctly across all the systems. Any of the mismatch here, and Joule won't be able to correlate the users across applications. Right. So that's about IPS, and we'll just quickly talk about how IPS has comes into picture in when there's identity lifecycle question. So in this diagram, SAP SuccessFactors acts as a source for employee data, and Fieldglass is acting as a source for contingent work data. An identity management solution derives identity from all this workforce, and SAP CIS receives the customer-specific derived identity and acts as a single integration point for identity access management. And in SAP Cloud Identity Services, an identity directory and identity provisioning act as a store and replication tool together, bringing in all of these user records and the management tools available inside the CIS itself. SAP Authorization Management Service manages policies for new BTP applications, and this is the standard right now. SAP Cloud Identity Access Governance also offers additional risk and access governance features. So if you are already having access to CIS, you might get to see all of these capabilities. There's also an important feature that I want to highlight, and that's real-time provisioning. You can immediately provision entities from the SAP Cloud Entity Services to any of the target system without waiting for scheduled sync jobs. And this feature comes in handy for scenarios requiring synchronous provisioning, like user self-registration that needs immediate system access, right? Currently, the supported source systems for real-time provisioning include identity authentication and SAP SuccessFactors Learning. The target can be any target system supported by the identity provisioning service. For Joule scenario specifically, this means that when a new user is onboarded and needs immediate Joule access, you don't necessarily have to wait for a batch sync job to run. This is especially useful in fast-paced environments where users need to be productive from day one. However, I want to note that for most Joule activation scenarios, you will still rely on scheduled sync jobs for bulk provisioning, and real-time provisioning is more of a component for individual user scenarios rather than a replacement for batch jobs. For more information is available on the real-time provisioning page in the SAP help documentation. I added that in the slide as well. I'll be sharing this slide and you'll be able to access these links as well. We'll talk about identity authentication or IAS. This is SAP's primary offering for authentication solution within a SAP cloud landscape. End users in SAP landscape are able to use the IAS component to authenticate and log on to cloud solutions that have been integrated with the CIS unit. So whenever you see a login screen for an SAP application, IAS is likely the service behind it. The IAS component generally works in conjunction with the identity directory component to provide authentication services for users that have a user record in either the identity directory itself, or they could have a user record in the third-party identity provider as well. A key strength of IAS is it supports for multiple rule-based authentication pathways, also known as the risk-based access controls, also known as the conditional authentication methodologies. So this means that you can configure it so users that meet specific criteria have to go through a different authentication process. So for example, users logging in from an untrusted network, you might have some IP address that you can identify it with, might be required to complete multi-factor authentication, while users on the corporate network might not, right? Or you might require different authentication for accessing sensitive financial applications versus general HR self-service. For Joule specifically, IAS is the component that authenticates users before they can interact with Joule. Without IAS properly configured and trusted by your SAP solutions, users can not read Joule. I will cover the specific authentication options and MFA capabilities as well, and the two operating modes of IAS in the next several slides. Meanwhile, it seems like there's a question as well. You have mentioned several times the UUID. When we connect an application to CIS, should we use the UUID as a subject name identifier for a specific application? Is this a must, and is it supported for all the SAP cloud applications? Example is for HANA Public Cloud. For sure, SAP ABAP Cloud Instance doesn't support the UUID as an SNI, or is it enough to have UUID as an attribute? What's the SAP recommendation for the Joule setup? UUID as a SNI or login name and or email as SNI and UUID as an attribute. UUID needs to be as an attribute, that's for sure. For a couple of applications, UUID needs to be as the SNI, but I would have to confirm that towards the end of this meeting. If you can stick around, Lubomir, then we can discuss on this topic. Just give me a second while I just mark this question in my note. May I please know how to may I please know troubleshoot steps if authorization authentication failure during user accessing Joule or missing setup in CIS configuration? Well, we will discuss that, Venkatesh, and we will also go through the tasks, right? So that's exactly what we are going to try to understand what is missing in your configuration. You might be able to identify then. All right, so we spoke about identity authentication in a brief. We'll walk through this one diagram which shows IAS operating in the proxy mode with your corporate identity provider. So in this architecture, IAS sits between your application and your corporate IDP. Here's the flow. So when a user tries to access an SAP cloud application, the application redirects the user to IAS. IAS needs to be configured in proxy mode here. It then delegates the authentication to your corporate IDP. Corporate IDP authenticates the user and sends back an assertion. Okay, and IAS then reissues the SSO token for other cloud application, applying any type of destination and trust configuration. The federation between IAS and corporate IDP is based on SAML 2.0 or OIDC standard. And importantly, IAS can enrich the assertion with additional attributes as well. This is critical because you need attributes like global user ID to be included in the SSO token. So that goes in as an attribute. IAS also supports system application as well, not just end user application. The key benefit is that you can reuse your existing single sign-on infrastructure, right? Your users don't need new credentials, and you don't need to maintain a separate user store for SAP applications. IaaS is simply going to act as a bridge, adding the SAP specific context that Joule or any other SAP application would need. And this diagram again extends the proxy mode concepts to show conditional authentication with multiple identity providers. IaaS supports what we call as the local authentication, as well as SAML and OIDC based delegated authentication. What makes this powerful is that you can configure conditional authentication rules so that different users are routed to different identity providers. For example, you might have employees authenticating through your corporate Active Directory, while contractors authenticate through a different IDP. And perhaps external partners are going to use yet another authentication mechanism. And IAS can handle all of these scenarios simultaneously through its conditional authentication rules. Well, for Joule, this is relevant if you have a complex organization with multiple IDPs. You need to ensure that regardless of which IDP a user authenticates through, the Joule relevant attributes, especially the global user ID, are consistently maintained and passed through. The IAS enrichment capability I mentioned earlier is what makes this possible altogether. Right, so this diagram shows another multi-IDP scenario, and this is an IDP-initiated authentication. The key point here is that you can secure your business network and allow partner users to log in via their own corporate IDP, and authentication is initiated by the corporate IDP itself. So the user starts their IDP rather than SAP application first, and upon successful authentication, a check for correct user group assignment could be configured. This is optional, but recommended for security, right? It ensures that the user only who are supposed to have access can actually get in. Identity authentication may enrich the SSO token from the corporate IDP with additional attributes. And again, this enrichment is what allows Joule specific attributes like global user ID to be added to the token. And for Joule specifically, if you support IDP initiated authentication, you need to test this flow thoroughly so that you can ensure that Joule works correctly when the authentication starts from the corporate IDP rather than the SAP application side. All right, so this is just an overview. I'll walk quickly through each of these, a comprehensive range of authentication options. This might be a little bit high level for high level and just for the sake of taking a glance. There's basic authentication, the traditional user ID and email and password combination, simple but effective for many scenarios. There's biometric authentication as well available using a FIDO to compatible biometric authentication devices like fingerprint readers or facial recognition. There's client certificates X509, which is common in highly secure environments. This is what you'd be mostly using. And reuse of Windows domain logon using Kerberos tokens for single sign-on. This is great for organizations that want their users to be seamlessly logged into the SAP application without using any with using their Windows credential without any additional login prompt. There's two-factor authentication, which adds a second factor of via soft token, web authentication, Radius or SMS. And there's delegated authentication, where authentication is delegated to a social identity providers or corporate IDP. I'm not really a big fan of social identity providers. Anyway, the key message here is flexibility, right? You are not locked into one authentication method. You can configure different methods for different scenarios and different user populations, and based on different risk level as well. For Joule activation, you need to ensure that your chosen authentication method works seamlessly with the SSO configuration, so users are having a smooth, uninterrupted experience when interacting with the Joule across LOB solutions. Right, so this slide again shows how IAS supports role-based access controls for applications. So with IAS, you can define rules that either allow, deny, or require two-factor authentication for access to specific applications. This is essentially your conditional access configuration. You can set up rules based on various criteria: user group membership, IP ranges, authentication methods, more. So for each application registered with IAS, you can define a set of rules that control who can access it and under what conditions. For Joule, this is important because you need to ensure that the conditional access configuration are consistent for both the BTP sub account and the Joule application. So if you have a rule that denies access from certain IP ranges for BTP, but allows it for certain specific LOB applications, you will end up creating inconsistencies that prevent Joule from functioning correctly for certain users. So the recommendation here is to review your conditional access rules, like review it holistically when planning Joule activation, rather than configuring them in an isolation for each of these applications. We will again come back to this point when we look at the full list of prerequisites near the end of this session as well. So maintaining a consistent conditional access is very important. While we are on the topic of IAS, we will also cover password policies as this often comes up in security discussions. IAS provides comprehensive password management options. Password policies can be used to determine the strength of an authentication required, the behavior for password reset, the password locking period, and, and other options as well. As an administrator, you can choose between pre-configured password policies, which SAP provides out of the box for common scenarios, but you can configure custom password policies to comply with even stronger corporate security requirements. IAS also allows different options for password recovery, configuration of email link validity, and user notification in case of credential changes, and also maintenance of passwords exclude list as well, which prevents a user from commonly compromised password. While password policies aren't directly specific to Joule activation, they are part of the overall security posture of your cloud IT services tenant. A well-configured password policy contributes to the security of your entire Joule-enabled landscape. So if you're using IAS in IDP mode, where IAS itself authenticates the users, password policies are going to become even more relevant. We'll drill down specifically into the MFA capabilities because security is always on the top of the mind, especially when you're enabling an AI assistant that can access data across your landscape. IAS supports several MFA methods like ODP via Authenticator app, web authentication, ODP via email, via Radius, via SMS, and MFA on per application basis, or users can opt to always authenticate with MFA through their profile settings. For Joule, MFA is particularly relevant when you're configuring conditional access again. You want to make sure that the MFA configuration is consistent across the BTP sub-account and the Joule application itself. If you have different MFA requirements for different application, users might experience unexpected authentication prompts when switching between Joule and the underlying LOB application. And this is going to degrade the user experience. All right, so we'll talk about cloud entity services within the context of Joule now. And quickly jump back in the questions again, share some overview of LDAP and where it fits in IAM. I might just do it. Just give me a second. Right, we'll just quickly continue and I'll come back to this question in a few minutes something. All right, so Joule is a BTP application. We already know that connects to another BTP application and it's available on other SAP cloud solutions. Right, this is the fundamental architectural reality. Joule does not live in isolation. It reaches across your SAP landscape to retrieve the data, execute actions, and provide responses. For a consistent user experience while using Joule across all the SAP landscape, two things are critical. First is the need to implement a single sign-on to ensure that the user does not enable to user does not need to log into each SAP cloud solution that is enabled with Joule. Imagine a user working in SuccessFactors and asking Joule a question that requires data from S/4HANA. They should not be prompted to log in again, right? That would be a terrible experience for the user and would effectively kill their option. And the second is that there is a need to keep the track of a user across SAP Cloud Solution. So this is exactly where the concept of global user ID comes in again. A user might have a JSmith username in SuccessFactor and John Smith at com in S/4HANA. The global user ID is going to provide a single consistent identifier that says this is the same person across all the system. Those two requirements, the SSO and global user ID, are exactly what CIS provides. That is why usage of SAP Cloud Entity Services is a mandatory requirement for the activation of the usage of Joule. Well, there is no alternative path and no workaround, so this is very important and doesn't need any second thought. All right, so whether in I'm just checking how LDAP comes in IAM context and how we can have that question answered for you, Abdul. And I'm just waiting for an answer from one of my colleagues, and I will give an answer back shortly on that. Okay, just waiting on that. Okay, while that happens, we will continue with our session here. The process basically will just let me check where we leave it. Okay, so the process involves configuring a SAP cloud solution, whether it is SuccessFactors or Ariba or Concur or S4 Private Cloud Edition or any other as a trusted application on CIS using the CIS admin console. So this involves configuration on both sides, the SAP cloud solution and the CIS tenant itself. The cloud configuration is performed to establish OIDC-based trust between the CIS tenant and the SAP cloud solution. At a high level, this involves an exchange of metadata between the systems, the CIS tenant and the SAP cloud solution. The CIS tenant shares its metadata with the cloud solution, and the cloud solution shares its own metadata with CIS. Once this trust is established, users can authenticate through IAS to access the cloud solution. For Joule specifically, OIDC-based trust is the required standard. This is this is important while SAML also works for many SSO scenarios. For BTP applications and specifically for Joule, OIDC is the way to go. If any of you have currently have SAML-based trust configured with your BTP sub-accounts, you would want to plan the migration to OIDC as part of your Joule readiness activities. This is actually listed as one of the key prerequisites, which we will review comprehensively near the end of this session as well. So LDAP typically sits at the foundation of corporate identity ecosystem and feeds user identities into Cloud Entity Services via IPS. And SAP Cloud Entity Services then serves as a standardized IAM interface that Joule relies upon for authentication, user store management, and role-based access during business activation. I can just paste this answer down for Abdul as a reply. Just give me a second. Second. There's another question. Is it mandatory to have FLP SSO configured with CIS to integrate with Joule? I just want to know what is FLP here. So when we migrate from SAML2 to OIDC, are there any do's and don'ts for target LOBs? Well, I do have, okay, Fury Launchpad, you mean. All right. So you would need to configure SSO with CIS to integrate with Joule, that's for sure. But this happens as part when you're configuring your S4 with CIS, you would be configuring this. They might have whatever corporate IDP you're currently using, you'll end up using the same corporate IDP as well. The only part is that you would have to plan how conditional authentication happens. And this needs to be consistent with how your conditional authentication is configured with your BTP sub account as well. Second, it is recommended to have it, but it is not strictly mandatory. Without IAS SSO configured for FLP, users would probably face a separate login prompt when Joule opens within the Fiori Launchpad. So you would have to configure IAS SSO for FLP as well. And just a second, if you need a document for that sake, I will provide that. Just give me a second. I will provide that towards the end of the session. We will continue with the session. We will not disrupt the flow of this session for now. All right. So if you have any current SAML-based trust configured with your BTP sub accounts, you would want to plan the migration to OIDC as part of your Joule readiness activities, right? So this is actually listed as one of the key prerequisites which we are going to review comprehensively in the end of this session as well. Well, what we'll talk about now is the global user ID concept because it is so fundamental to Joule. The global user ID uniquely identifies a user across SAP business applications and services. Therefore, it replaces the need for a correlation of different external user identifiers. Without this global user ID, you would have to maintain a mapping tables between different user IDs across different systems, right? This is going to be fragile and error prone, and it does not scale. And applications like SAP Task Center or Joule, which have cross application features, this requires the global user ID to be maintained for all the users in all the systems in scope. And I need to emphasize that all users in all the system in scope, right? If even one system is missing the global user ID for a user, Joule will not be able to interact with that system on behalf of that user. And the global user ID can be generated in two ways. One is using your SAP Cloud Entity Services itself, or you can use your customer ID or any other identifier that has already been maintained on a third-party IDP. The recommended approach is to use SAP Cloud Entity Services, specifically identity authentication and identity provisioning, to generate and distribute the global user ID to all the solutions in SAP landscape. This is the approach SAP recommends because it keeps CIS as the authoritative source for the critical identifier. Think of global user ID as a single common user identifier, the SAP GUID, that serves as a universal passport for a user across your SAP landscape. And this is one approach where SAP Cloud Entity Services itself generates and distributes the global user ID. Here, the step-by-step flow is that a user is first created in SAP Cloud Entity Services identity directory, and this can happen through a manual creation or through IPS from a source system like your corporate directory or through user self-registration. And then the SAP Cloud Entity Services generates and returns a value in the user UUID field. This is your global user ID. It's automatically generated by CIS when the user record is created in the identity directory. And the step 3 is that the SAP Cloud Entity Services IPS distributes the generated global user ID from the UUID field to all the connected LOB solutions. So IPS is going to pick up this value and provision it to SuccessFactors or Build Workzone or S4HANA and every other connected system. This is recommended approach because it keeps the identity directory as single source of truth for the global user ID, and IPS ensures the consistent distribution to all the target system. There's one place where the ID is generated and one mechanism that distributes it everywhere. Right. So there's also an alternative approach for organizations that already have their own identity management solution, generating unique identifiers. In this alternative approach, your customer identity and management system is going to generate the global user ID. This could be your existing IDM solution like SailPoint or One Identity or maybe any other governance tool, identity governance tool. In the step 2, SAP Cloud Identity Services is going to receive this value in the user UUID field. The externally generated identifier is then written into the CIS identity directory. And then the IPS component of SAP CIS is again used to distribute this GUID value to all the connected systems. The distribution mechanism is going to remain the same. IPS is going to handle it. This approach works well when you already have an established IDM solution that generates a unique user identifier, and you want to reuse that global user ID. You might have already consolidated your user records inside your IDP, and you might already have a global user ID, and you might want to reuse that. So this is the way to go. However, and it is important to know that you still need CIS in the picture to distribute the value. You cannot bypass the CIS entirely at all. Either approach is valid. Whichever you choose, the critical requirement is that global user ID needs to be consistent across all the system in your landscape. Any inconsistency in even for a single user in a single system as well is going to cause the Joule to fail for that user in the cross application scenarios. My recommendation is that if you are starting fresh, go with the recommended approach and let CIS generate the GUID. If you already have a mature IDM landscape with established unique identifiers, the alternative approach can save you some migration effort. Right. So let's bring everything together with the IAM reference architecture. So this slide we were discussing yesterday as well. The slide shows the high-level SAP IAM integration flows with the SAP Joule. What you're seeing here is how all the components we have discussed, Cloud Entity Services, Build Work Zone, the LOB solution, interact in a Joule-enabled landscape. So some of the key flows that we will discuss now is the authentication flow. Users are going to authenticate through IAS, which is going to be delegated either to the third-party IDP or IAS issues the token by itself, right? Um, so IAS issues the token that include global user ID and the other relevant attributes. That is the key point. And then there's provisioning flows. And provisioning flows, you can see there are there's green provisioning flows here. It is similar to what IAM lines are as well flowing through. We are going to discuss the provisioning flow and authentication flow separately in the next slide as well. So basically, IPS provisions the user's records, role assignments, and the global user ID from the identity directory to all the connected systems, including the SAP Build Work Zone. Content and application flows, the black line here, the CDM you see, that specifically is basically used for bringing in all the content from your LOB solutions. Build Work Zone federates the content from LOB solution, and it is going to make it available for Joule to surface to users, and the authorization flow is also included in it. So when you are bringing in CDM in the Build Work Zone, you're also bringing in authorization in Build Work Zone as well, and that happens through IPS. So user permissions are checked at each system to ensure that the user has the right access to the data that the Joule is trying to retrieve. And Joule is going to respect the authorization model of each underlying system. So this reference architecture is what you should be aiming for in your landscape. It represents the target state for Joule enablement. This sequence diagram just shows the step-by-step authentication flow when a user accesses Joule on S/4HANA. So say your user is logging into Fiori Launchpad, and when your Fiori Launchpad is opened and the user needs to be challenged for credentials, what happens is that your CIS is going to delegate the authentication to your corporate IDP. So the login screen that your users currently are seeing that is challenged from your corporate IDP, the same challenge is going to be appearing from the corporate IDP to the business users in their Fiori Launchpad. Once the user is going to provide the authentication details, it flows back. The challenge is verified by corporate IDP. And once the corporate IDP is going to give out the access token, this access token is then bundled with global user ID inside the Cloud Entity Services tenant. And that's why we call it from the access token. Its name has changed to federated access token. This only means that global user ID has been attached to this token now. All right, so federated access token is sent back to S/4HANA, and then Fury Launchpad is shown, and then your user hits start Joule, and now Joule sits on BTP. We already know that, and now BTP is going to request for it's going to challenge it's going to check whether a challenge is needed. It's going to send it to Cloud Entity Services. Or Entity Services doesn't let it go beyond this. It's going to know already that this global user ID user is already authenticated. That's the reason it's going to return the federated access token back to BTP, and that's how Joule is going to know that user is authenticated. Well, once this authentication is done, your Joule access is granted, and then user can perform any Joule action. Well, there's another important concept that comes in picture, that is setting up your principal propagation. This needs to be happening from your Cloud Connector setup, and your principal propagation needs to be tested with a set of users when you configure your principal propagation with your BTP sub account to your Cloud Connector to your S4. All right, so we have understood how CIS bundles in the global user ID and calls the access token as federated access token, and kind of acts as the middleware that is going to distribute the access token whenever a SAP cloud application is going to ask for authentication. We will now just take a look at how all of the system that come in picture when we are uh, having Joule set up entirely, how the authentication authorization flows are going to happen. You can see there are multiple lines here, but we are going to focus only on two major components from this diagram. One is IPS and the IAS. Well, IPS is something that you will be using for reading and writing the roles from to and fro your S/4HANA, your build work zone. We need to understand how this needs to happen, right? So your users are currently in S/4HANA PCE, say, okay? So you read all these users and roles, and you bring it in your Cloud Entity Services. And Cloud Entity Services is going to assign the identity directory, is going to assign each user the global user ID. And then an IPS is going to be set up so that the global user ID is then being propagated back to your S/4HANA. Now your S/4HANA has user records with external user ID maintained, and that external user ID is going to be basically the global user ID. So you have established this consistency now. You have already established global user ID in both of your system. Now for Joule specifically, bringing all these user roles and authorizations to build work zone is very important. So when you're configuring your build work zone, you're going to make build work zone obey the IPS roles and authorization. This is one of the configuration that we are going to discuss when we are going to discuss the tasks that I have designed for all of the attendees here. And we are going to talk about what exactly is the configuration that sets up the build work zone IPS as well. So that is about IPS. You have identified that global user ID needs to be propagated, and you need to bring all your users and roles and authorizations inside your build work zone. And now we will talk about the IAS. So when a user is going to, we already spoke about IAS, how that happens, how your authentication request is delegated to your corporate IDP. That same exact flow is what being shown here through these lines that flow through IAS. So we already understand the IAS part. We already understand what IPS is doing in the whole picture. Now we will talk about the build work zone part. So this is how your data is populated inside build work zone navigation target mapping and role target mapping. So this is what we are going to discuss in next couple of slides, and then we will jump into the tasks. Okay, so this diagram can kind of act as one of your reference diagram when you are setting up Joule. You can just come back to this diagram anytime and then understand what is missing currently in your setup. All right, this block diagram again provides another view of the same architecture, but from a component perspective. Then you can see that there are major blocks. The user logging in through SAP Private Cloud. The line following from one, and there's numbering given how the authentication happens and how the authentication is returned back to SAP Private Cloud. That's exactly what we discussed in the sequential diagram as well. So there are multiple lines here. This is all basically compiled into one. So your user groups are populated into your navigation service, and your groups are brought in from your SAP Private Cloud, and they are all of these transport is happening through identity provisioning, right? So this is important to understand how your identity lifecycle, your your IAM landscape needs to be configured in a way that all of these groups are consistently being populated inside your build work zone, so that Joule can obey all the latest changes that have happened in your SAP cloud solutions regarding the roles and authorizations, what the user is authorized to do right now, what the user is or not authorized to do right now. You continue to maintain all those type of details in your SAP Cloud Solutions itself. These IPS are going to take care of the transport of all the authorizations inside the navigation service, so that Joule can understand what has been changed. All right, so there's another question in the chat. Just let me go through those. You already have global ID based on an employee number. So I guess we are in a good place already for that, but I believe success factors, they currently log into the system via an email address. Would that need to be mapped between the employee ID and email? Our existing SAP logon via this global ID is via Kerberos token from the domain login. Um, this might need some review on how exactly your entire um, IAM landscape is. I won't be able to recommend anything just in the chat with just this with just this sort of information here. I'm sorry about that. Well, there's another question from Sebastian. Is there any transport mechanism to transport CIS configuration already implemented in dev to QA and prod? Yes, there is. You can do that. We can we can definitely do that. I can hook you up with the sort of documentation to do that towards the end of this session as well. Let me just do that and keep as one of the things that I need to get back to after we speak about the tasks. All right, so this diagram is also useful as a reference when you're planning your implementation. You can identify which components you already have in place and what needs to be configured still. Okay. All right, so summarizing, SAP CIS is utilized as a primary authentication and provisioning solution. Um, Sorry, I need to just answer this question. Just give me a second. What happens if S/4HANA system is not connected to CIS, but directly connected to corporate IDP? Is the connection to CIS really mandatory? Yes, Sebastian, it is mandatory. So it is the same question again, right? So say you have logged in from your Fiori Launchpad, and because your S/4HANA system is connected to the corporate IDP directly, you are authenticated. But once you click on the Joule icon, you are again requesting something that is sitting on BTP to be um, to log in to for you to log into, and you have not logged in because that BTP sub account is connected to CIS, right? So it is important that you connect your S/4HANA system to the CIS. And you can configure and your CIS to work in a way that your corporate IDP itself is currently used as the authentication method. And the way your users are going to log in would not change with that sort of configuration. Okay, I hope that answers your question. And there's another question, LOB is like Ariba Signavio, which will not be integrated to build workzone. Then from where does Joule read capabilities from such solutions? That's a good question. And I'm not sure how Signavio is currently achieving this with Joule because we mainly focus on success factors and at least S/4HANA, where build work zone is important to be integrated. But if we will get back to you on that one, Kanika, how Ariba and Signavio uh, will pull the capabilities uh, for for authorizations perspective, because you integrate your Signavio and Ariba directly, right? So much of the authorizations and groups are propagated through Cloud Entity Services itself. While for S4 and SuccessFactors, you would be configuring in a different way. So in Ariba, there's an automated way with which you configure your Cloud Entity Services directly with through a single click, right? But in S4 and in your success factor, there is extensive configuration that is required, and build work zone acts as as a middleware from where all the content is fetched. Efforts are in place on how the build work zone can be um, removed from like for a couple of other uh, cloud solutions. There is support that doesn't require build work zone at all, but that kind of information is maintained in uh, one of these help documentation where you can find what needs integration with build work zone and what doesn't. I'll just add in the documentation here. That might help. Do you know what technically is behind the user store of the work zone navigation service? Is it just a small DB within the service, or is it using some IAS connection? Um, I'm not sure, but for at least what I know, there is a button that comes in identity provisioning configuration of the build work zone itself, and that needs your configuration of target system in your cloud entity services as build work zone. So I believe yes, IAS connection is used for this behind this user store, but I'm not sure about how exactly that is put in place. Okay, so I'll go back. SAP CIS is utilized as the primary authentication and provisioning solution within the SAP landscape. For the purposes of Joule activation, this specifically means that SAP CIS IPS will be used to provision user records and their role assignments to connected system in SAP landscape. Without proper provisioning, users will not have the necessary access to Joule. And SAP CIS IAS, I know I'm using a lot of abbreviations here, but just for the sake of easiness, uh, IAS will be used to authenticate users that access applications and LOB solutions that have established trust with the CIS tenant. Without proper authentication, users cannot reach Joule. And then there is an identity directory, which will be used to store user records and also their role assignments represented as groups. The CIS IDDS also acts as a source for generating the SAP Global User ID, as we discussed, the unique identifier to identify a user across SAP landscape. So in summary, usage of SAP CIS is mandatory and is a requirement for the activation and usage of Joule. Full stop. Okay, so we'll jump into build work zone shortly. So if Cloud Entity Services is the identity foundation for Joule, build work zone is the application delivery and content federation foundation. So build work zone is the layer that connects Joule to your various LOB solutions and makes their content accessible through a unified interface. So let me start by framing the problem what build work zone actually solved, right? Here's a fundamental problem. In a typical SAP landscape, you have multiple systems, SAP S/4HANA, SAP S/4HANA Cloud, SAP NetViewer, including Portal, SAP BTP, and Business Suite, and SAP Cloud Analytics, and I don't know, there's many more. And there's always more. Each of these systems come with its own launchpad or homepage. Users have to navigate between different entry points to access different applications. This creates a fragmented user experience, and it increases the learning curve. It reduces the productivity and makes it harder to get a holistic view of your work itself. The question becomes, how can business users easily access relevant applications and the services to get their job done more efficiently? The answer is consistency through harmonized user experience, right? A UX integration via a central point of access. And this central point of access is exactly what SAP Build Workzone provides. For Joule, this is critical because Joule needs to be able to surface content from the multiple LOB solutions through a unified interface, right? You cannot have Joule connecting to a dozen different launchpads. Build Workzone is like the single pane of glass that makes cross-application Joule scenarios possible, right? So the motivation was here to integrate all the cloud and on-premise solutions to a central entry point and support the multiple S/4HANA system, SAP S/4HANA systems, and to provide a state-of-the-art solution on multi-cloud environment, and to align all the UX integration concepts and capabilities. So you can see there are multiple dashboards that you can see here. These are all from the different applications. You need a harmonized user experience that can bring all of these uh, applications together in one screen, and that's how Bid Works On comes into existence. Well, SAP Bid Workzone Standard Edition provides application sites with central access to SAP Cloud, on-premise, custom third-party application. It includes multiple pages, a drag and drop page editor, business data visualization cards, and custom branding and extensions. SAP Build Workzone Advanced Edition goes further beyond it. It optimizes business processes with employees, partners, customers, and suppliers. It includes pre-packaged line of business workspaces and guided experiences. There's content management, knowledge management, Q&A, ideas, polls, and Microsoft integration. It is a full-featured digital workplace. SAP Start is the pre-packaged entry point that provides search, to-dos, and interest cards with content from SAP Cloud Delivery solutions like S/4HANA and SuccessFactors for now. Well, it requires minimal configuration work, right? It is designed to get you up and running quickly. For our Joule context, the standard edition is the baseline requirement. When you run the Joule booster on BTP, it is going to provision a build workzone foundation plan instance, which aligns the standard edition capabilities as well. You don't need the advanced edition to get Joule working, although it is certainly going to add value to your overall user experience. So all in all, when you hit the Joule booster, a build work zone foundation plan is going to be added and it is going to be instantiated, and your first LOB solution will probably be ready to go to be used. But then you would have to plan how you're going to integrate your other LOB solutions, because you need to understand how CIS build work zone comes into picture when you are integrating, keeping the unified Joule concept in mind. Well, we'll break down this slide on SAP's cross-integration landscape with the build work zone as a central point of access. I understand many of you are not familiar with the build work zone because it is natural for companies to not use build work zone in the first place. So we will see a core integration service like cloud transport management, cloud identity services, and custom domains. So these are the backbone of securely connecting SAP systems, automating workflows, and managing cloud environments. Build Work Zone is going to act as a central hub for users. It is supported by mobile start as well, task center, and notification service. So think of these as productivity boosters for mobile access, task tracking, and real-time alerts across apps. Enterprise search and compilation are going to help users find data and unify SAP S/4HANA or custom apps as well. So moving to BTP, this is the SAP's innovation engine. Of course, we have spoken about this yesterday. It hosts cloud solution like S/4HANA Enterprise Portal and Business Suite. Um, like developers can build HTML5 apps and use ABAP or deployment and solutions here. So the key integrations include S/4HANA Cloud, SuccessFactors, and Analytics Cloud for insights, and third-party apps and content packages are also part of the ecosystem. Build Work Zone Standard Edition service enables organization to establish a central point of access to SAP, right? So custom built and third-party applications, extensions, both in cloud and on-premise. The benefits are clear: increase your productivity, efficiency of business users by quickly and easily accessing the relevant apps and content. You can see how Joule can do the same. Um, Joule also has the same capabilities, and that's the reason why Build Work Zone has been reused when we are talking about Joule. The key capabilities includes a central point of access for all the apps, tasks, and notification, everything in one place. A home page personalization that is specific to Build Work Zone again. So users are going to see what is relevant to them. Intuitive role-based navigation with flexible content structure. You can again see Joule also uses the role-based navigation. So users in Build Work Zone are going to see the apps and content that match their roles. Smooth application integration for different UI technologies and third-party web applications. It doesn't matter whether an app is built with SAP UI5, HTML5, or some other technology altogether. Integration with central services for managing tasks, notification, and single sign-on, and connecting to services like SAP Task Center. An extensible framework for customization and branding. So you can make it look and feel like your organization. Build Work Zone integrates content from a wide range of sources: Business Suite, Enterprise Portal, S/4HANA Cloud, S/4HANA On-Premise, SAP Business Technology Platform, applications is the aggregation layer. It doesn't replace SAP Fiori Launchpad now. It is just for the sake of Joule that we are going to use Build Work Zone. We are speaking about Build Work Zone right now because you need to understand why we chose Build Work Zone as the middleware that is going to integrate all these LOB solutions, right? It was originally designed so that you can have a unified entry point for all the users that are there across your SAP line of business solutions. And Build Work Zone brings in all the data from a common data model, something called a CDM, and you can expose your content through your SAP LOB solutions, and then have it consumed using by building some kind of websites in Build Work Zone. That was the initial idea, and how Joule uses it is it's going to use all the backend data that is going to be exposed, and it is going to obey the roles and authorizations that you uh, are currently assigning in your LOB solutions at the moment. So the idea is to reuse the concept that we already have in place because it's going to be redundant otherwise. And it is much more easier to configure the CDM, and that's the reason we have Build Works on Standard Edition used. So I will walk through what's the key tools and services you are going to be using within SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition. So understanding these tools is important because you will use them during Joule activation. There is site directory, which is where you create, edit, delete, and search for sites. You can set a site alias and go to runtime to see what users see and import or export site configurations as well. Well, site directory is more relevant when you are having sites in build work zone that are being already accessed by your employees, and you want to make sure that a certain site has Joule icon visible on them, and you can control the visibility of Joule icon on what sites. That's why we are talking about site directory. Specifically, what we are interested to know is content manager, which has two important sections. That is my content and just one second. Yeah. That has my content, which is where you create, edit, translate, and delete content items like apps, plugins, catalogs, groups, and roles. Content Explorer is where you can select content providers, explore their content, and add or remove content items in your site. This is where you browse what your connected systems make available. Site Editor, again, is where you configure site settings, assign roles, manage cross-site content, and manage site-specific configuration. Well, channel manager is again particularly important for Joule. This is where you create and edit content channels. You get status and show reports, map destinations, fetch the updated content, configure the content providers. So content channels are how your build works on connects to your LOB solutions to pull in their application content. When we get to Joule activation steps, channel manager is where you will be configuring all the content provider for your LOB systems. And the settings, you will be able to view the error logs, mapping system aliases, and if you want to convert neo-based sites. Each of these tools are going to play a role in getting build work zone ready for Joule. Okay, there's another question. If we want to enable Joule um, both at build work zone as a central entry point and S/4HANA Pure Launchpad, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. At the design time and runtime destination, we can maintain only one URL, which is currently pointing to build work zone. Uh, how can Joule work at both places? Right. This is something that needs to be assessed. It is still possible. You can have, if you have your site directory and if you are able to, um, if you're able to enable the Joule icon to appear in your build work zone directly, can it can have it's much more easier to configure Joule in build work zone as an entry point itself. It is possible. Have you tried it out? Just want to ask. All right. So yeah, I have seen a couple of customers who have tried to activate in build work zone itself, and it was successful, and it is much more easier to do it as well. So you might as well try it out, Nika, just for the sake of second. Sorry for the disturbance. There's another question. There's another message from Sebastian talking about build work zone. We came across an interesting issue some days ago. Build work zone docu specifies um, SAP build work zone standard edition only supports externalized ID of type UUID. This means, at least in our case, we are currently not able to populate our uniquely UUID in the work zone as the employee ID is not of type UUID. Do you know if type can be different in the advanced work zone version? Document is I can take a look at that, but can't comment on that right now. But it needs to be in a specific format, I suppose. I think have you already checked this particular document? Just give me a second. I'm going to share you a link with which you can configure uh, to use your existing global user ID. Give me a second. Just waiting for a document that I had sent for one of the customer. Okay, just one SAP notes that I've shared, which can help you. And if you want to use your own QID value, then this document could be helpful. Let me know if that works for you. Okay, so we'll move ahead in the session. So SAP Build Work Zone, as we know, provides end users access via web and mobile apps as well. For identity and access management, SAP Build Work Zone relies on SAP Cloud Entity Services using IAS for secure authentication and federation with third-party identity providers. The IDP manages SAP identities while provisioning handles the user and role assignments directly inside the work zone for user store. Just give me a moment. I need to. Sorry for the interruption. So we'll get back. Um, so what I was speaking was you can have Build Work Zone, which can provide end users access via web and mobile apps. So for identity and access management, we know that SAP Build Work Zone uses CIS for secure authentication, and we already know that IDS manages the SAP identities while provisioning is handling the user and role assignments directly inside the Work Zone user store. The solution includes various components integral to its functionality, such as notifications, mobile services, UI theme designer, and digital workplace services. These are all not connected to Joule UI. You won't need to worry about Ju- about these particular functionalities that SAP Build Workzone gives in context of Joule. This is all good to know what all is possible in Build Workzone itself. So it also allows your custom application as well, created with the SAP Build apps or Build Application Studio to be integrated via a pre-built content channel. Additionally, applications from SAP Build for Process Automation and SAP Task Center can also be made available. The content can be integrated using two types of channels: content providers or content packages. SAP Cloud Connector enables secure integration with on-premise system, and connectivity service handles the communication with both SAP and third-party systems. So customers can also configure SAP Build Workzone to use custom domains or via SAP custom domain service, and content migration between environments from development to test can be done via manual export or import using SAP Cloud Transport Management as well. So overall, SAP Build Workzone is designed to centralize access to build business application and content and approvals with flexible integration and management options. All right, this is just again one of the diagram that can help you understand how Build Work Zone comes into the picture, where if you want to unify your users to have one place to log in from, to work from, and you can see that's where navigation service, which is going to be very much relevant when we are talking about Joule, appears in picture. All right, so navigation service is built using your CDM, and then you have your user store, which is being pulled up from the CIS itself. These are the two things that you will be configuring when we are talking about Joule itself. Is there any community blog to connect S/4HANA 2025 on-prem system to work zone? I have not come across yet. I would have to take a look. If it is possible, please stick around in this meeting after the session ends, and I can look up for a document that can help you in your uh, in this particular task. All right, so SAP product solutions can serve as a content providers for the central SAP Fiori Launchpad, which is based on SAP Build Workzone itself and the standard edition service and runs on SAP BTP. This is again one of the repetitive slides that we have. We just have this so that if you, in case, come back to this slides, and you will be able to understand what exactly is happening. Why do we have Build Work Zone exactly in place when we are talking about Joule itself? So we have already spoke about Build Work Zone. I will be blazing past some of these slides for now, and we will be quickly talking about the tasks because then we will also have to talk about if there's any questions, we need to address them as well. This is one slide that I want to show as well, because when you're configuring your S/4HANA as a content provider to build Workzone, you would be exposing business content from SAP S/4HANA, right? Using this particular transaction, and you would be choosing to expose your roles and authorizations. So another document I would like to add here, I'll be sharing in the chat here. Just give me a second. Mm. It's actually an old community blog, but it's really helpful when we're talking about um, activation of Joule in your S4. This is very comprehensive. Specifically, there is one of the SAP notes which you might want to take have a special attention to. That's particularly your. Just give me a second. So there's one SAP notes here. So you would be basically configuring your IPS from your S4 to your to your build work zone, right? Many of the customers complain that their transactional use cases are not working. So in that case, what I would suggest is there is a particular Excel that is available in this SAP Notes, which will come handy to you when you are selecting the roles that you need to propagate to your build work zone, and you might want to pay special attention to those. So that's present in this SAP Notes. You might want to take a look at the business roles and API for transactional capabilities. This is just one of the key documents, I suppose, for your setup journey. You can go through this. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me via email as well. Just give me a second. I will drop in my email as well in the chat here if you want to reach out to me in second. Is there any link which talks about possible capabilities of Copilot when integrated to Joule? No, I don't have anything that can help you integrate Copilot and Joule. Just give me a second. Okay. All right. So this is how you expose your Launchpad content to your build work zone when you configure your CDM exposure. We will talk about build work zone again in context of Joule. We have already spent much of time understanding how Joule exactly uh, brings in all the IPS, brings in all the user authorizations from your SAP Cloud solution and using your SAP Private Cloud or all of your SAP Cloud solutions. Basically, you pull in all the authorizations and you build your role mapping service using your IPS that is present in CIS. So you basically configure an IPS with which you are going to pull all your roles and users, and you are going to populate something called as role mapping service. And when you are configuring your build work zone content channel in your channel managers, you are going to basically building the navigation service with that configuration. So we'll talk about these two specific service now. So navigation service acts as a book for your for your Joule that, okay, if you want to create a particular purchase order, or probably if you want to see a purchase requisition, then what type of URL that Joule needs to access. This is provided by navigation service. And whether the user is actually authorized to see that particular purchase requisition or not, that is going to be given to Joule by role mapping service. And those are the two reasons why we have these two in place in this diagram. So we already have understood that, okay, there's a third party. If there's a third party identity provider, then you can configure it to your cloud identity services, and you can delegate the authentication challenges to your third party IDP, and SAP CIS is going to act as an identity federation layer, which is going to take the access token from your IDP and and basically give out the federated access token to all of your solutions that are connected to your CIS. All right, so keeping that as a baseline, let's move ahead. So this is exactly how you, so basically this is exactly what I was talking about when we configure the CDM, you're going to build the navigation service. And when you are configuring the IPS, you are building the role mapping service. That's exactly what these two slides are talking about. And now we will quickly wrap up, and we will take a look at the key prerequisites that some of that we discussed already yesterday, and we are going to take a look again. So as I said, Joule entitlement must be available in your SAP BDP global account level. This is one of the tasks that I had given in yesterday's task document as well. There needs to be a relevant line of business that you want to activate Joule with that needs to be registered at the SAP BTP global account level. It needs to show up under the system landscape, and all of your LOB systems that are relevant for Joule activation needs to be integrated with your cloud entity services tenant, mainly for the authentication. And also global user ID of those users must be maintained consistently across the landscape. Your BTP sub account needs to be connected with build work zone, and also needs to be integrated with cloud identity services using OpenID Connect. That's one of the main key prerequisite. Your IPS needs to be migrated from BTP Neo to SAP CIS infrastructure. How can you know that? That is something that we will discuss in the tasks as well going forward in few minutes. For Cloud Private Edition, SAP HANA S4 HANA Cloud Private Edition, at least SAP Cloud Connector setup is very important for work zone and the Cloud Entity Services usage. For global user ID, it needs to be added to single sign-on assertion attributes that are transmitted during the authentication process. Conditional authentication and conditional access configuration needs to be configured consistently for BTP sub-account and for Joule application. One of the recommendation is to have this exactly the same for all of your uh, applications that are coming under the scope of Joule activation. You kind of have similar conditional access configuration, or at least exactly the same conditional access configuration for your BTP sub-account and your LOB solution and your build work zone. And of course, user permissions need to be assigned accurately to users. And of course, and if you have your IPS job set up correctly, then the provisioning to SAP Build Work Zone is also going to be smooth. So that needs to be enabled for the usage of Joule via LOB solution. And SAP Build Work Zone needs to be configured with appropriate content channels to expose the content from LOB solutions. For S4, we discussed how you can do that, but for other different applications, there are specific ways you can do that. And I have provided a link in the chat, and there's one link provided by Venkat as well, Venkat Tamada in the chat, which leads to a community. Just one second, not this community. Just give me a second. I'll send the link again just for your reference. This is the help portal link with which you can understand how you can integrate with each of the LOB solutions and what are the prerequisites as well. Okay, and then appropriate destinations need to be defined and maintained correctly at the BTP sub-account level, and other identity access management architectural designs. Basically, whenever you have a complex IAM landscape that needs to be factored in, you need to understand how your users are going to be affected when you are having multiple LOB solutions coming into picture. So if you want to take help from SAP for understanding how you can bring in CIS and how you can consolidate your Cloud Entity Services tenant, then you can talk to your TQM or for aligning with an IAM planning service. It's called Identity Access Management Planning Service, and our security COE cybersecurity team has experts which can help you for a way forward for consolidating your CIS tenant and all your user base, depending on your SAP landscape. All right, so this we have discussed yesterday on how what are the activation steps for your activation of SuccessFactors, and we'll quickly blaze past this step. Just give me a second. There are a couple of links as well. I want to make sure everybody gets these links, so just give me a second. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So just going to bring in the tasks to the picture. Just give me a second. Right, this one and this one. All right. Okay. So there are two types of tasks in both the days of AGI that we have covered. So day one tasks are high level. They are related to what we spoke about yesterday, the BTP part and how, and probably there's a CIS part as well in the bottom. Just let me check. Yes, there's configuration of BTP with your CIS and all the configuration steps that you need to take for CIS as well. And then your Cloud Entity Services implementation tasks as well. There are two types of tasks as I spoke. So tasks one don't need any type of configuration changes. these are basically some sort of checks. So basically, when you give access to one of our SAP consultants in a readiness check service, type one are the type of tasks that we will be conducting. So we um, say, okay, this is this is checked. Then what next steps needs to be taken? And those next steps are actually the type of task two. Okay, so you perform some type of component specific implementation task in type 2 task, and it is recommended that you perform these tasks on trial instance. So basically those are sort of the housekeeping that I want to mention before you can start getting your hands on these task documents. I'm going to attach these documents in the chat again for people who have not received the documents yesterday. Please try again today here, and if you didn't receive even now, please put in the email again so I can get back to you on those. A second, I'm attaching both the day's tasks as well as the presentation as well. Just give me a second. Checking if they are attached properly. Yes. Okay, day one. I think I just sent to one of the user. I'll be sending it again. Everyone. Right. So we'll quickly blaze past okay, a couple of people are not able to see the content again. There's another question as well from Sebastian. When Joule connects to external systems like S4, is it using the global user ID automatically, or does it need to be configured somewhere? We are currently doing principal propagation with our employee ID besides specifying it in the federation attributes. You don't see any configuration steps for using the GUID. Um, the global user ID is not automatic. It requires explicit configuration and specifying it in federation assets attributes. It's indeed the critical configuration steps, but there are additional prerequisites that must be in place for it to work end to end. So when a Joule calls an external system like S/4HANA, it uses BTP destination service to perform principal propagation, right? Exchanging the user's OIDC access token with a backend token to execute the API call in the name of the logged in user. The user entity that gets propagated depends entirely on what identifier is present in the token. If you want your current setup propagates the employee ID, that is the attribute that is being forwarded to S/4HANA, and S/4HANA will attempt to resolve a business user matching that employee ID. That user does not need to be identical across systems, but there must be a unique, consistently mapped attribute to correlate that user. And that's when global user ID configuration comes as a requirement. For Joule, global user ID is mandatory, right? It's not optional. All the SAP products integrated with Joule must use SCIS tenant, and users must be represented consistently using the same global user ID across integrated applications. And for the sake of your for supporting with the documentation for this, just give me a second. Okay, there's another question. I will get back to that on for Libimir as well. Just let me blaze past through these content here, and also go through what are the steps that we have for these tasks. So there's basically checking if the entitlement is available. That DAS application entitlement, this needs to be available. If it is not available, talk to your account executive. What kind of contract or forms that you need to fill up and sign, these needs to be in place before you can start activating Joule itself. And of course, then we jump into your verifying the entitlements for global account. That's again the same. Just give me a second. Let me come here. Yep. So you need to see your system under the system landscape. So if you want to activate Joule on S/4HANA system, then that S/4HANA system needs to be appearing inside your system landscape here. And if you're not seeing it, then you can use this particular link to see how your particular relevant LOB can be made to appear in this system landscape. And then, of course, you need to be able to see the appropriate sub account for subscribing to Joule, right? So Joule is basically deployed as an application, BTP application. It is only available on multi-cloud environment and on BTP sub accounts, and are only those sub accounts that are hosted on specific data centers. And you need to pay specific attention to this if you have not been able to install Joule while you have all the other things lined up, then it is most likely because of this. And then, of course, you will be checking it with this particular link. You can go and see what are the data centers that are currently supported by Joule. There are a couple of them. Most of them are already available. And if you're having a sub account in these regions, then you don't need to worry about creating a new sub account. If even if not, then creating a sub account is fairly straightforward. You can do that for Joule specifically. And then, of course, you need to verify the presence of LOB solution within the system landscape. This is again a, a repetitive step, and you want to be able to make sure that you want to have CF environment available in your BTP sub account, and that you can check in this particular space. So you can have your BTP sub account overview tab open, and you will be able to see what are the spaces available, and you just need to see one of these space available, then that should be enough. And there's multiple other checks. We will quickly see whether your sub account has established trust with your CIS tenant. So something like this should appear. So if you're using a trial global account for creating your trial sub account, and if you're having a trial CIS tenant, then this is how it's going to look. And pay attention that you need to have custom identity provider for applications, and this needs to have a CIS tenant under it, and that needs to be established via a OIDC connection. And that is going to be fairly easy if you're using the established trust button. And that established trust button turns gray once you have set up this um, particular configuration. All right, so type 2 tasks are basically the implementation tasks, and better to do this in your trial account. And there's a couple of slides given for the sake of reference, so that you can use these as a reference for creating your own trial account and trying out the implementation tasks. And we will quickly jump into the type 2 task. I have shared this doc. Yep, I have shared this doc, Kanika. I will share it again as well. I'm seeing if there's some sort of other way that I can add these files, because most of the people are not able to see that. I'm just patching it again through a different way in the Zoom chat. See if this is going to make it available. All right. So the second day tasks are a deeper level tasks again. So CIS implementation tasks. So this again is how you can create your trial account, and you basically need to have your CIS tenant activated through your BTP cockpit. And this is how you do it. There's a couple of documentation available as well for each of these steps that you can take. But the most important step basically is to check whether you have your CIS tenant migrated to your latest cloud entity services, or whether it is on Neo itself. So that is possible when you go to this link. So this particular link is going to lead you to a tool with which you can basically search by your customer ID. And with that customer ID, you will get to know what are your CIS tenants available to you. And if the CIS tenant link looks something like IPS and looks something like Dispatcher HANA on demand, then that means you are on an older infrastructure, and you need to raise a ticket to our security team so that you can bring your CIS tenant on the latest cloud entity services infrastructure. So that's one important thing that I wanted to highlight. And let me go through what other things needs specific attention. All right, so you also need to disable, when you're configuring your identity provider, you need to disable your forward all SSO request to corporate IDP, or else what is going to happen is that each time you click on the Joule icon, you'll be prompted to log in again. So this is something that you need to keep as disabled. So that's something to take care of. And your in your identity federation configuration, you need to toggle this active. So if you don't toggle this active, then your the federated access token cannot be stored inside the CIS. So that's something that you would want to take a look at as well. So this is also an important configuration which ties the information that we have spoke so far in the presentation. Okay, there's another question from Livermore as well. I will take up both the questions, Livermore, just after I stop speaking about this tasks. Okay, so once we have once we have checked the user authentication user store, identity authentication user store, the next step is to check whether your GUID is sent as a part of the SSO assertion. This is also a very important part. You might want to take a look at your build work zone configuration, and also all of your LOB solutions need to have this particular self-defined attribute in place in the configuration. Right, so you need to validate your IPS configuration. That is, you need to keep your source system as IAS and your LOB system as a target. And this also needs to be to and fro. So you need to bring in all your users from your LOB solution to IIS, and once the GUID is populated inside the CIS, you're going to configure a target system as your LOB, and you're going to push back all these updated global user IDs inside your from your IIS tenant into the LOB solution. So that's pretty much the first step. Once you have your global user ID available in your S4, that's one step resolved. Then the next step is to have all these authorizations flowed into your build work zone, and this is the connection that you would require. And the way you would also have to validate the IPS configurations, um, how your build work zone tenant itself can be configured as the IPS target system. And there are a couple of ways you can also validate these IPS configurations. There are documents available for validating these. So in your bid work zone, there's a settings tab in which you can go and verify whether your IPS is properly set up or not. So that's possible if you're having a bid work zone admin access. If without an admin access, you will only be able to see content channels or even not that. So you need admin access to build work zone for that. Just a second. So this is one of the other important part that I was talking about throughout the presentation. That's the validating of the conditional authentication configuration. So whatever conditional authentication is set up for success factors in this case needs to be true for the bid for your BTP as well. So if your success factor looks like this, then the conditional authentication should configuration should look similar for your BTP as well, in order to for Joule users to have a consistent user experience. Okay, so this is one of the RBAC configuration validation. This is for security experts who already know enough about how their current landscape is set up as, and then there are task two steps again for each of the findings that you have had in the above section. You would be taking certain actions to resolve those checks, whether you find something is missing or something is not configured properly. There are documentation which can help you basically address these findings and move forward. I will be adding these documents again inside the chat, and there are a couple of members who are saying that they are not able to access this document. I will be noting down their emails and reaching out via email. Just give me a second while I add these again for people who have dropped or joined back in again shortly. Okay, then that's it from my end, colleagues, and whoever has dropped in email, I will be getting back and reaching out via email to them with the documents. While if anybody has any question that needs to be answered, I will be going through the chat and I will be getting back to them with the answers. Please stay back if you have any open questions, and we'll stay here for another 5-10 minutes. Thank you very much, colleagues. And there's also a poll that needs to be filled in. If you have time, please take time to answer the poll as well. Thank you very much. Mm, second. Faced any questions that are unanswered and needs attention, because there are a couple of questions I see, and the inbox is full. Oh, yeah. Um, Joule for success factors, I can give you a couple of links that can help you. Just give me a second. You can use this document for division of Joule for success factors. So, good document. Also, there's one document which can help you if you're facing any issues as well, common setup issues. Then there's another document you can follow. And be adding that as well. On the same author. We'll go back to Lubomir's questions. Just a second. Lubomir is still in the call. Right. Okay. Transport to CIS configuration. QA is up to something that I'm getting on. Lubomir, to answer your question, you would need two separate Joule instances. One Joule can be only integrated with one tenant as per SAP product as well. Since 100 and 120 are two distant tenants for you, each would require its own dedicated Joule subscription and its own dedicated SAP BTP sub account as well. What was the question to? Just a second. I will come to your question as well, Venkatesh. Just give me a second. For the steps to understand any issues with CIS configuration, I would say, have you gone through the first document that I shared regarding the like the same document that you, I think, was this who requested the success factors? No, it was not you. Just give me a second. There's one document from Nagesh Karpati again, and that's for specifically for S/4HANA. And in that, I was just showing a Excel that is relevant for um, your S4 configuration, right? All right. Is there any saving in keeping success factors and S4 IAS into one IAS? Just one second. I'll quickly answer. Have an answer for second question of Lubomir. Okay, so the booster provisions standard edition only at the moment, not advanced. For a centralized advanced work zone, manual configuration is required, which is beyond what the booster covers. And just a second, see if I can find a documentation which can help you in your setup. As for public cloud system, and I would like to each one of them connected to Joule. This means that I'll have three Joule sub accounts with Joule instance plus work zone. On the other hand, I would like my work zone to be my central point and use the advanced feature. Does Booster also cover this? If I activate Joule through Cockpit, is it creating standard or advanced edition? So that's your answer there. It creates a standard edition, so you would have to manually configure this advanced edition. Um, so we strongly recommend not enabling the work zone zero subscription now manually in the BTP sub accounts. You can follow the onboarding uh, document as well. Just make sure that you have make sure that you review these this learning as well before you go ahead and do that activation. Just a second. Are there any configuration steps for integrating build work zone advanced with Joule? Yep, that's what I'm looking at. Just give me a second. Believe this learning would cover activation with advanced. Um, it works on, might want to have a look, but I'm not sure if that covers it. Just give me Small minutes. I'll pull up the actual documentation. So if you want to use SAP Bid Work Zone as advanced edition as your central entry point, aggregating the content from 3 to 4 as per system, this is architecturally possible, but it requires a separate additional sub account for manual configuration, which is beyond the Joule booster, of course. So you would be basically provisioning the Bid Work Zone advanced by yourself using a separate booster, and then you will be configuring these content federation from multiple S4, um, and that is a post booster step, and it is a manual configuration activity. So you might want to take a look at this document as well. I share the presentation. I have already shared the presentation in the chat. If you have not received it, then have you, if please first of all try to open the Zoom meeting using Zoom app. If not, I will be closing the Zoom meeting now, so it's not a provision right now. Let me see if there's any unanswered question. There's transport of CIS from dev to QA. From dev to QA. From dev to QA. Sorry to agree on that point previously. CIS configuration are tenant based and they need to be replicated manually, or any script can be used for any approach between the tenants. Right, colleagues, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out right now. Within this 1 minute, I'll be closing in 1 minute. If there's any question that is unanswered, please highlight that again. I can uh, check back. Thank you for joining the call. Wish you a fantastic day. Thank you very much.